Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're doing a review of the original graphic novel Fine Print, Volume 1. Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I am your host, Brent, and today we're talking about something different, not superheroes, so don't look at anything beside my head. We're going to talk about an original graphic novel, Fine Print, Volume 1 by Stepjan Sejic. If you haven't heard his name before, he's the gentleman. He started off on Witchblade with Ron Mars. Most recently, his biggest work published has probably been this Harleen series for DC, the Black Label line. This was in 2019, I think this launched. He also did a couple issues of Aquaman. I think it might have been a little bit before this or after. But since then, he's kind of jumped back off the I'm going to be a big name artist train and gone into doing what he wants to do, which is the original graphic novels he's been kind of doing over the last couple of years. So this is about mature content, adults only kind of stuff. So if you're under the age, so to speak, don't watch this video, obviously. But it's not for kids. But before we get into all that, let me please ask you to do one thing. Please subscribe. Helps me out, helps the channel grow, lets you know when I drop new videos, all that good stuff. So, Fine Print. What is it? Well, it's an original graphic novel from Top Cow, and Image Comics. And it's about, what is it about? It's a little confusing. Basically, it's an original graphic novel about angels and demons, or cupids and succubi, or incubus, succubus, that kind of thing, and the deals that they strike with humans to keep them alive, and just kind of tumbling down that road of how this all works in the storyline, and where this leads this one particular character, this human that we're attached to. So, if you're not familiar with Stepjan Sejic, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name wrong, he's a Croatian artist. He does all of his stuff digitally. He's a wonderful, phenomenal artist. If you haven't read Harleen, I definitely recommend you go check it out. I also do recommend, and this might not be in your taste, the Sunstone graphic novels. There's 7 volumes out now. I have them all digitally, and I think they're phenomenal. I really think the storytelling is really, really good. They're very dialogue heavy. They're kind of they're labeled as like erotica or whatever on Comixology, and they do deal with BDSM and sex and all that, but it really, truly is a love story. And I got into it more for that because I got attached to the characters, because Allie was so interesting. Who's the other girl's name? Sarah in that book was so interesting, and just I was kind of amazed and kind of intrigued with the BDSM stuff, not knowing anything about that world or whatever. So there's a little bit of that intriguement. The art is beautiful, it's gorgeous, but really the love story between these two women in Sunstone really kept me reading, and now I'm eagerly awaiting the next volume of this series as it comes along. And now the series is, after volume 6, it transitioned to the love story between the other 2 characters that were kind of in that book. The guy best friend that started out with Allie, and who, I forget the girl's name, who he ends up with. So again, adult only content. It's about sex, a lot of nudity, a lot of graphic stuff in there. But, if you want to try it out. So Fine Print is a little bit less of that. So if you've read Sunstone and you're expecting the same level of, exposure, one might put it, or nudity, or graphic sex scenes or whatever that might have been in Sunstone, this is not there. There is a little here, a little nudity, a little sex and stuff like that, but not as graphic as like Sunstone was and or is. So it's a tale removed from that. But I think it suffers a little bit. Not because of that, but because the story is a little disjointed. So we spend the first 15 pages of this graphic novel getting to know one character who signs his deal, and you think you're going to follow that character. And then immediately the graphic novel jumps to another set of characters, and it's not about the girl you were following at all in the first 15 pages. And that really kind of took me out of the story for a little bit. This one, I feel like Sejic is kind of trying to jump around with different points of view. You're following, you think you're following one, is she a succubus? I can't remember. You think you're following one, we'll just call her a demon. You think you're following one demon, but that's not really the case at all. You think you're following the girl that they're talking about in the first 15 pages. That's not the case at all. Then you meet another set of demons and kind of like explore how the angels and demons interact and, you know, have sex even though they're not supposed to, because it creates this weird effect or whatever. And then you're introduced to like the leader, one of the leaders of the demons. You know, Hades makes an appearance, and you're not even sure if he's the real leader, because again, you could have like Hades be the leader, or you could have Satan be the leader, or Lucifer, or whatever the hell you want to call the leader of the demons down there. And then it jumps from there to another woman, the new woman, who is the real main character of the story. And you're going on her journey on how she ends up, you know, signing this deal and selling her soul, basically, you know, to these succubi, so that they can kind of keep themselves alive, right? So, and that is the most interesting part of the story, but it takes a while to get there. So, while I'm interested in the slice of life stuff that Sejic does so well in Sunstone, so that immediate first 15 pages did grab me, but when it jumped immediately to another set of characters, you know, I'm intrigued, the artwork is still beautiful, but when I discovered that we're not going back to that initial situation, that initial girl, although it is referenced later on, I was a little disappointed, because it seemed like Sejic had created an interesting set of characters. So the disjointedness of the story here, you know, didn't work for me as much as I, you know, it might have worked in like a TV show or a movie or something like that. So, again, I don't know. The nice part is that for fine print is broken up by chapters. So you have chapter 1, 2, 3, I think it goes till 7. So every time you have a new chapter, you basically can assume you're jumping to a new character or a new scene. So it is broken up nicely that way, I guess, with the large dichotomy of like where you're jumping around. Like in Sunstone, I don't remember there being chapters in the last volume. There might have been, but it wasn't like every single scene. Usually it was like with a page turn. But since that was kind of taking place at the same time, in the same town with the same set of friends, it's not as large of a jump as, you know, we're in the depths of hell with some demons and angels having a secret meeting to the girl in the bookstore that is getting, you know, seduced by this other demon kind of thing. So the chapter breaks do, you know, make sense, but not jumping onto the main character right away, having as long of an introduction as we did have in the graphic novel, I think did it a little bit disservice. Maybe if it was shortened, if it was like 3 pages or something, and you just saw a demon seduce somebody and get them to sign their soul away. But it was 15 pages. Like, this is like an entire issue of a comic book. And I feel like if you were reading this in single issue format or something, you would go, all right, here's our main character. It's this girl. And if you got the second issue and you don't even see that person, and then the third issue, you never see that person again, you might be mad. You might be going like, hey, what the hell? What happened to this character we saw in the first issue? Like, usually the first issue is where you set everything up, right? So I think that's kind of working against it a little bit. I'm still intrigued about the next volume. I do think I'm going to read some more of it. You know, the artwork, I think Cedric'S artwork is phenomenal. It's gorgeous. It's all digital, how he does it. So the nice part here, though, is like, I think as he's growing as an artist with all these graphic novels, and he does some other ones, like I know his wife writes on some of them. I think she does the art for this other line, Death Vigil. Or Bloodstain. There's a whole bunch of series in this like Sunstone world that you can kind of like go into. I haven't read all of them. I've only read the Sunstones and this other stuff that Matt Hawkins has done in this like erotica slice of life stuff. But as we're going through this, like you can see when, you know, similar to like Lee Bermejo in the Joker graphic novel, Sejic turns his art up to 11 for impact with certain scenes. And he did the same thing in the Harleen series, right? You had like a sort of a basic style for most scenes, and then when there was a big moment of impact or a big splash page or some sequence where he really wanted to, you know, put it all on paper per se, put it all out there, and really impress you and make you feel something different, he does it through the artwork, where he takes that simplistic style and makes it more painterly. So if you've seen some of his cover work, he usually does the covers in this more painterly style. And that's really what grabs you. And then you kind of open up the art and it's a little bit less than that. It's a little bit more like scaled back. So he does the same thing here in the fine print graphic novel that he's been doing in most of these graphic novels for a while, where he paints it up to 11 with the painterly style for these big moments of impact, in addition to a splash page or like a really kind of interesting panel layout and stuff. So that is really interesting, and I always do enjoy that aspect of reading anything that Sejic puts out, because he does these cool things with his artistic ability. Like Liber Mejo does the same thing in the Joker graphic novel. You'll get a basic line work for half of it, and then you'll get a fully painted page or a sequence for like the really big parts of it. So similar thing here, and I think it really works for how Sejic works for his slice of life stuff. Also, I am interested in the continuation of the story. I do think the book suffers a little bit from not explaining too much, or maybe it suffers from explaining things too much. This doesn't kind of make sense, but so I want more information on how the Demon's Soul contract works, right? The book is called Fine Print, so you think you want more about that, even though that's not really what the book's about. It's probably about the effects of the fine print. And there's the main character, our main girl, does ask, like, what's the fine print here? How does the selling your soul work? Like, what do I get out of it? What am I losing? All this stuff. So that is addressed in here, but there's a whole lot of like politics and just interplay between the angels and demons that is kind of touched on, but not enough to really explain it. So when you're reading it, especially, this is like the second chapter, you're getting introduced to all this stuff, and you get hints of it, but you're left wanting more questions. And then when you don't get those questions in the volume, you're kind of left unsatisfied because you think you were going to get the answers to those questions in the first volume, when clearly he's laying out like a bigger contention between these two rival groups, and you're probably going to learn more about that in a future volume. I mean, that's fine, but I would have maybe scaled back on how much you introduced if you're not going to answer those questions at all. So I think the book suffers a little bit for that. Whereas like in the Sunstone stuff, and I'm specifically calling back to his other work, you have a character who's new to the BDSM world, and she's asking questions to her girlfriend / mentor, and you're getting the full answers to those questions. So if was like me, who doesn't know anything about that world at all, you have the same questions, and you're getting those answers as you're reading along. Whereas like this here, you're having two characters that are fully immersed in that angels and demons world, and whatever universe that Sejic is trying to create up. Like, it's not really kind of hell. It's probably his own version of it. The same way, like in the Spawn comics universe, their angels and demons work differently than like the regular Roman Catholic version of heaven and hell, that kind of thing. But the reader is asking questions because they're throwing out all these different terms, right? They're throwing out things like the crowning, and you're kind of explain what it is, but you're kind of not explained. So maybe I need to go back and reread it to kind of fully immerse myself in it. But on first read, it didn't feel like Sejic answered those questions satisfactorily, or maybe he didn't, fully flesh it out in his brain. It's clearly left hanging, and that hangingness is left me feeling wanting. The other thing I think the book suffers from is that you're introduced to these two characters at the end of the volume, that you're now basically told that these three people are your new main characters going forward into volume 2. And I think that's a bad idea. You were introduced to both of these characters briefly in chapter 2, but it wasn't quite made clear that these are going to be main characters going forwards. I don't know. Maybe I would have started this book, same thing I said in the Hawkeye episode 1 and 2 review for that show. I would have maybe started this book at the end of volume 1 and maybe had some flashbacks or something to explain away what was here. This kind of plays out more like a prequel in the first 5 minutes of what could be a really good movie at the very end, as opposed to a really good start of a series that you're going to want to read. You know what I mean? There's so many questions, so many answers, and then when you finally meet what's probably going to be the main characters going forward, you're like, well, the book's over. Like, there's no hook other than that to bring you forward, because you're invested in, the main girl who's selling her soul, and she has a lover, a demon lover, and then you're kind of told, well, hey, that demon who you've met twice and, is not a main character, at least so you think you are, she actually sold her soul, and these other two demons are going to be like servicing her kind of with all her pleasure and desires going forward, and it's the competition of these two demons that's going to drive the story with the girl who sold her soul going forward, right? So that's kind of the hook of the book, even though it doesn't appear until like the very last page or when you kind of figure out that this is what it's going to be going forward. So I think the disjointedness of the story kind of makes it suffer here. Is it worth reading? It's too soon to say. I had fun reading it, but I also enjoy his other work, but I would not recommend this to somebody like, hey, this just came out, go read this. Instead, if I knew somebody who was looking for this type of story, I might recommend Sunstone to them first before I say, hey, go read Fine Print. This is more like, hey, if you like that, this just started. I'm not sure where it's going yet or if it's going to turn out good or bad, but this did just come out. Like, that's what I would tell them. But I would point them to Sunstone first because that's a whole lot. And if you can read Sunstone, you can definitely read this. It's just, because this is a more scaled back version of it so far. Because it's not as sexy or anything like that. But there's just not enough to hook you in this first volume. Let's just put it there. So I enjoyed it, but I also enjoy his other work. If you have not heard of Sunstone, if you have not heard of Fine Print, you may not enjoy this first volume. Hell, you may enjoy it, and then you may go read Sunstone and say, I really got a whole lot out of Fine Print Volume 1 because it introduced me to this. But I would say maybe you enjoyed it more because you then read Sunstone right after, and you're really going to enjoy Sunstone as opposed to just enjoying Fine Print for what it is. So there it is, my review of Fine Print Volume 1. As disjointed as that review was, that's kind of what the book feels like. So I would probably give it like a 3 out of 5. I don't normally rate books here, but I feel like you can kind of see where this is going, and I feel like I'm going to enjoy the further volumes of this story more. But just as it is, it's not really an engrossing read, and it definitely reads like something like a new series, a start to something new. And while promising, it doesn't deliver on its promise of being a complete story in this graphic novel. So there you go, my thoughts on Fine Print Volume 1. Have you read Fine Print Volume 1? Let me know down below what you think, and we will talk about it down there in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, we will see you guys in the funny pages.